Welcome to Boom and Bust at the News Forum. I'm your host, Tony Clement, and it is my pleasure to be with you again today. With COVID-19 in the rearview mirror, there is increasing evidence of its long-term impacts on the Canadian economy. That's by the pandemic itself, but also by government's responses. Here to discuss is Dr. Trevor Tombe. He is a professor of economics at the University of Calgary and a research fellow at the School of Public Policy. Welcome to the program.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I guess the first question is, you've kind of sounded the alarm over basically a lower growth path for Canada since the pandemic. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So we get every quarter information from Statistics Canada on how many goods and services are being produced by Canada's economy. And while the latest information at the end of 2022 does show that we're producing more than we were prior to the pandemic, we are producing far less than where we would have been had pre-pandemic growth trends continued. And the magnitudes are pretty significant. We're about 6.5% below what our prior growth trajectory was. And that might not sound like a lot, but it adds up to about $180 billion per year in lost economic activity. That's larger for context than the entire energy sector, or about $4,500 per person. So we've ratcheted down to a lower growth path, and that has significant costs, not just in the abstract, but for real Canadians.
And can you kind of describe what the attributes are for this smaller economy? What you think is the causation aspect of it?
Sure. So it's not unusual for recessions to be followed by ratcheting down to lower growth paths. We've seen that in other countries, I guess most recently the financial crisis, and various factors can be a cause. First, there might be some workers, older workers in particular, that might withdraw from the labor force. It is difficult to adjust into other sectors if you're displaced in a big way from one. Productivity growth can also be lower because of the disruptions associated with the recession, and investment could lead to lower levels of capital accumulation. So I think rising uncertainty around where the economy is going in the future may very well lead some investment to kind of pause, and therefore capital will be lower than it otherwise would have been.
What about the trends like work from home? Could that be a factor as well?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. I think the information we have is still kind of early days, but when I break out productivity by sector, by the fraction of the workforce that is involved in remote work, it does look like there might, and I want to emphasize might, be a negative effect on productivity from working from home. And there could be lots of potential factors related to that. And I'm sure it's context specific. It might work for some, but it could indeed be a factor behind lower productivity growth, to the extent that the in-person interactions could facilitate better processes, better ideas, better coordination, perhaps better work effort and monitoring. So that absolutely could be a factor, although I can't say for sure at the moment.
Sure. Getting back to people dropping out of the workforce, I think we all have anecdotes of people who were 2 or 3 or 4 years away from retirement, and then when the pandemic struck, just sort of said, "Okay, well, throwing in the towel now. Might as well. There's nothing going on anyway." Is that part of what you think happened?
That is certainly part of it. It is, in addition to the regular aging of the population, and therefore an increasing number of retirees, a drop in labor force participation, but a reduction in the growth of labor and hours worked is indeed accounting for, about a third of the overall gap that we see between where the economy is and where it otherwise would have been.
And do you think that there are certain sectors that were hit harder by that?
So that I can't say, in that we usually don't get that kind of detailed demographic information sector by sector. So some further analysis is surely going to unpack this in greater detail than what I have, but this is just kind of an aggregate number.
Right, right. And I think that's really important to note that, this is the general trend, and there might be, upon further analysis, some sectors that are doing better and some sectors that are not doing better. Again, anecdotally, we've all heard about restaurants closing because they just can't get the workforce or what have you. So this is a kind of an all economy situation and challenge, but different parts of the economy may be dealing with it better. We're going to return with our guest, Dr. Trevor Tombe, at the University of Calgary after these messages. Please stay with us.